From the WATE.com Digital Center, answering your legal questions. This is Ask Isaacs. Now, here's Lori Tucker and attorney Greg Isaacs.
Hi, everyone, and good afternoon to you. I'm Lori Tucker, along with our legal analyst, Greg Isaacs, and we're talking about something today, Greg, that has caused a huge outcry in our country and really beyond, no matter what side of the aisle you're on and what you believe happened. This is the shooting of Alex Pretti by Border Patrol agents in Minneapolis.
And it's one of those rare cases where we all, the collective we, the nation, have become eyewitnesses because we have seen video footage that was taken contemporaneously with this shooting or this killing. And I want to preface some of the comments today. You know, we hear about the presumption of innocence. You know, there is no presumption of innocence when you're looking at a video.
When you see it played out.
When you see it played out. The only time there's a presumption of innocence is if you are a jury, a juror, collectively a jury, in a criminal defense case. But when you look at the unequivocal evidence in this case, frame by frame, and you juxtapose it with the legal requirements for a legally justified shooting / killing, and what took place in Minnesota, it is really hard to get those two things to reconcile.
Speaking of timeline, let's go ahead and show you, just in case you haven't seen it, or maybe you have seen it, you want to go over it again. Good Morning America had a really good timeline that Aaron Kotursky put together. So let's take a look at this.
And we need to warn you, if you've not seen it before, it's very graphic.
Yeah. That is hard to watch.
It's heart-wrenching, gut-wrenching, very difficult as you become an eyewitness to this intentional shooting of ER nurse Alex Pretti.
Let's talk a little bit more about who Pretti was. You said he was an ER nurse, an ICU nurse, a licensed concealed carry gun owner with no significant criminal history, meaning he had a handful of traffic tickets over the past. That was it. He was present, as you saw there, near agents who were confronting civilians. So what does this say, Greg, about gun ownership? And there are so many questions about that gun. You saw what appears to be his gun being removed from the scene, but it also appeared that he never drew his gun.
It does, and there are three things that come to mind when we watch this unfortunate series of videos and these compilations. And one, was this use of lethal force justified? And the Supreme Court test that has recently emerged in Barn versus Felix is an objective totality of the circumstances test, whether the officer or others were in imminent fear of serious bodily injury or death. And what the court did was reject the narrow moment of threat test, which gave law enforcement some latitude. But when you look at that big picture from Google Earth, the officer that fired the shots right before the shooting was engaged with the bystander with the orange backpack that Pretti tried to assist after she had been assaulted by a Border Patrol agent. He, in a very caring, nurse-like fashion, protecting himself and her from apparent pepper spray. So, you know, in terms of the reasonableness of the force, that individual, Border Patrol officer, just turns and after the gun had been removed from Pretti, fires a shot as other officers are leaving, then shoots 9 more times as this individual lie on the ground. Now, second take, we have two significant constitutional fundamental rights at play here, and I'm surprised at the comments that were made by Homeland Security, by Kash Patel, the FBI, and the administration, and they're now trying to moonwalk those comments back.
Yes, and initially, here's the deal. Federal officials initially claimed that Pretti approached officers armed and resisted disarmament, justing defensive fire, and that turned out not to be the case, at least according to the video we have seen.
That turned out not to be the case, and let's talk about the First Amendment to the United States Constitution, and there's a reason it was number 1. It was first. Congress shall make no law abridging the right of the people to peacefully assemble. And what's remarkable here, that's exactly what was happening. So, you know, what we're doing, we're playing Orwellian semantics when people, and let me just tell you how these things rush out. When you saw other high-profile law enforcement-involved shootings or shootings during protest. Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Kyle Rittenhouse. People don't make public comments. They talk about there's an ongoing investigation. We need to get the facts before we can rush to
and
judgment.
Floyd was killed with a knee to the neck.
Knee
It
to
wasn't
the neck.
necessarily a shooting, but still this involved violence.
Right, but let's go to your right to protest. And some of the initial statements, instead of calling the individuals protesters, such as we saw with the other shooting, they're called.
Are you talking about Renee Good?
Renee Good.
Yes.
So immediately there's a rush to judgment that says basically these were domestic terrorists.
Wait, well, let me ask you this, because it says here, okay, with Alex Pretti, there was no clear evidence of brandishing, but the gun at some point was visible. With Renee Good, there was alleged vehicle threat.
And there's a difference. We'll talk about just opposing, comparing them, because it's a good comparison and contrast. But again, under the First Amendment, you're not a domestic terrorist if you sit there and utilize and exercise your First Amendment right. So it was interesting how the bystander in the orange backpack that Purdy became the Good Samaritan to try to protect was just literally bowled over and assaulted for no reason other than being there. So you have this really dramatic evolution of these ICE raids. So when protesters show up and peacefully protest, they are being met with overwhelming force and now lethal force. Now, there's a difference between those that show up and violently protest, those that show up and try to do other things.
But what about those? And this has been the subject of many, many, many comments. Show up with your cell phone, holding it up. Clearly, the agents don't like that at all.
Well, you know what they need?
That exasperate.
They need to
right
teach
or
them,
wrong.
smile, you're on camera, because there is no law against,
Correct.
Videoing law enforcement unless you are obstructing justice. Now, the other titan of the Constitution that comes to play here is the Second Amendment. And what's interesting is this individual had a handgun carry permit, never removed the gun from his side holster.
Now, what about the fact that it was locked and loaded, ready to go, like a lot of rounds?
Well, that's an interesting question. And here's when it becomes, and people ask me quite frequently, how do I get in trouble when I'm carrying a gun? There's a Second Amendment right. Tennessee has open carry, as does Minnesota. And the way you get in trouble is brandishing. So, you can carry a gun all day long, but you can't point it, touch it, refer to it. And brandishing is typically displaying or pointing a weapon at another, conduct that communicates an immediate threat, or actions that would reasonably place someone in fear. None of that is present in the Pretti videos that we see over and over.
What about this? Let me ask you this, because did this jump out at you as well? Should they have even been the subject of tear gas or pepper spray?
Well, when the person,
did their actions call for that?
When the protester in the orange backpack was assaulted, that, in my opinion, was an unreasonable use of force by Border Patrol. The use of pepper spray, as Purdy, a nurse, kind of jumps in to kind of help her off the ground, I think was an unreasonable use of force. And then, when you look at all the legal standards, and that is, we broadened the moment of threat test to look at a totality of the circumstances. The officer that fired that weapon in no way objectively or reasonably, and again, we are all eyewitnesses, was in imminent threat of serious bodily injury or death. Was anyone else in imminent threat of serious bodily injury or death? Yeah. No. And it's amazing that Kash Patel stands up and talks about, if you bring a firearm to this, you're a domestic terrorist. Remember Kyle Rittenhouse got invited to the White House in a Black Lives Matter protest when he went armed and defended himself? But that's different. He not only brandished, he shot. This is a nurse with a handgun carry permit that never did this.
With concealed, it was concealed. Hey, really quickly before we run out of time, wanted to talk to, and I wanted to share my interview just a few minutes ago with former KPD Chief David Roush, now TBI Director and head of the International Association of Police Chiefs, calling just within the last day or two for calm, and also saying to me, we need to do an independent third-party investigation into what happened. Let's take a listen.
I would tell you that it's certainly concerning, and there are challenges that I think that need to be addressed, right? And so there are a number of things that I think we need to have clear discussions on. As far as the investigation itself, that needs to be an independent review, and there needs to be an opportunity for that investigation to go forward. There are, I know I've seen all of the coverage on this, and there are a lot of people opining, but knowing the challenge of investigations based on obviously the role that I fulfill here in Tennessee, there is a need for the investigative process to take place to really determine what all took place there and the actions that happened. And I know a lot of people have made opinions about what they saw, but there are a lot of things there that really need to be investigated, and I think that's important at this point.
When you were police chief here and we had so many different situations, you were always the voice of calm, a very relatable voice of calm. And now in this position, here you are again calling for calm. Let's talk about the importance of that amidst this huge outcry that really is shaking up our country right now.
Absolutely. So I think in policing, we have unique perspectives. Our job specifically requires us to step into the chaos and to bring calm. And so I think we're in a unique position and opportunity, especially with the new role that I have as president of IACP on the international scale, to be able to step in and to call for that calm and call for the reasoning, right? And so I think we've got this unique opportunity to call on the White House, who has shown great support for policing, and to call on that president and to say, convene all of our leaders to have this critical conversation about where we are and where we need to be. And it's, this isn't unique. We've had these types of challenges before, as you mentioned. And so I think we know the path, we know how to get there. And I think it's an opportunity for us to have these really smart conversations to get us there at this point.
Have you spoken with the president or some of his staff regarding this?
Yeah, so the ICP has reached out, as the message we put out has stated. We did get contact back yesterday from the White House, from staff, and so we're working through what this looks like in terms of a convening and an opportunity for not just police chiefs, but for all of us in the profession and leadership to sit down, have this really critical conversation about where we are and where we need to be. And you mentioned the rhetoric, Lori. The rhetoric is out of control. This is not the time for that. And so what we really need is for leaders to step back and understand that this isn't political, right? Policing is an apolitical profession. And what we need right now is what policing can bring to it. And that is a nonpartisan, apolitical look, and talk about rule of law, and talk about Constitution, and talk about what needs to be done to maintain safety. Community safety and police safety and public safety are all the same thing. And so we need to really highlight the importance of public safety at this. For the folks in Knoxville, I would say, show your support to whatever side you're supporting, right? But do it in a peaceful manner. Do it in a way that is understanding. And I always rely on the quote from our esteemed congressman from years ago, Howard Baker, who said, listen to the other side. They just might be right. I think this is a time in our history where that really is necessary right now.
You know, and we appreciate Director Roush speaking with us this afternoon. He's always very accessible with us, and we appreciate that. I have to say, though, when he said peacefully protest, isn't that what Alex Pretti was trying to do?
Again, that's what he was trying to do, and I think Chief / Director Roush, longtime police chief here in the city,
Very
of
highly
Knoxville,
regarded.
highly regarded. Said that the temperature needs to be turned down, and one thing I think is interesting is the use and the rhetoric politically, and I think Director Roush did a good job of saying this really isn't an issue that's weighs on one side or the other, R issue or a D issue. It's a humanity and it's a policing issue. But, when we had the insurrection of January 6th, those individuals were called tourists and protesters. When we had Black Lives Matter, those individuals were called Antifa agitators. Every time someone has been killed, Renee Good and Alex Pretti, the very, very top of the food chain, Christine Ohm from DHS has said these are domestic terrorists. Now, there is immunity if you're an elected official, unless you make a statement that has a reckless disregard for the truth. But when you have an ER nurse that was committed to treating veterans, and he is there peacefully exercising his First Amendment right, and he's being a good Samaritan when he helps the lady that had been assaulted by Border Patrol.
And his parents have said he was very concerned about his country. He wanted to show up and make his voice heard.
And he's exercising his Second Amendment right. But to say that he was a danger, and the head of the FBI says don't carry a firearm, and
when you have a permit
the head
to
of
do
DHS
so legally?
calls him a domestic terrorist. Well, let's all take a deep breath and realize these are people. These are humans. They're why label them something they're not? A domestic terrorist is someone that shows up at a school and shoots and kills child after child and student after student. When you show up and peacefully assemble to say this is not the way it should be done.
And everybody says don't make it political. It is political. When you have so many people who are now taking the victim's picture here, well, for all intents and purposes from that video, Alex Pretti looks very much to be a victim until, proven otherwise. But we have people trying to use AI to make his picture something other than what he was.
But doing what I do, and we are armed in courtrooms with, and what we're armed with is the Constitution and our Bill of Rights that checks government. And if we allow Border Patrol to come to Minnesota, we allow ICE, who has been doing a really good job prior to this, and it was very anonymous. When someone would get arrested in Sevier County Jail, Knox County Jail, they would run a records check. ICE would come get them, and they would be deported. They'd be sent to Louisiana for a due process hearing. But it wasn't this the Constitution be damned approach. And what scares me is when you have people going in homes and schools without warrants, under the guise of illegal immigrants.
Grabbing people out of their cars.
When we call, and grabbing police officers in Minnesota just because they happen to be brown. So when you have people without search warrants, when you have people using, and you watch that video, not only the lethal use of force for Alex Pretti, but the lady he tried to protect is unacceptable, is an unacceptable standard.
So say this goes to trial and they go through the video, it's incontrovertible, and they realize that this officer was so wrong. What could happen to this officer?
What kind of trial? Are you going to charge him civilly?
Well,
are you going to charge him with civil rights violation for a criminal offense?
Will this go to trial?
But my point is, if it doesn't stop now with the guise of immigration, with illegal aliens, and these are it's what a great name, illegal alien. They're people that are foreign, and they're people that didn't comply with immigration. And if they're not supposed to be here, they're not supposed to be here.
Right.
Not debating that Jose worked, and did a great job in the farms. That so and so Rosalita, who was a great cook and the community loved her. That's neither here nor there. It is, illegal immigration is illegal immigration. But if you allow the government to take away your rights next time you're pulled over and the debate becomes something other than immigration, then it is going to impact everybody in a very significant way.
Let me go back. What could happen to that officer?
Well,
what would
first-
happen in the legal system? What happens to happen next?
Well, it's what we're seeing transpire is one that was not under the legal standard that's we have today, an objective look at the totality of the circumstances. It does not look like the officer was in imminent fear of serious bodily injury or death. Doesn't look like Pretti was fleeing, although that wouldn't have really made a difference because he wasn't a convicted felon. It does not look like any other members of the community were in danger from him.
And he was shot 10 times.
So the lethal use of force does not appear to have been warranted under these facts. So do you charge him criminally? Do you charge him with a civil rights violation? We've seen cases recently in Memphis where officers, a lot of them were acquitted recently. You see the George Floyd case where Officer Chavin was convicted. But this case is unusual because normally decision makers respect the police process. And as Director Rouse said, there needs to be an independent investigation. But let me tell you how divided and acrimonious it is, because you have two separate sovereigns. You have the Homeland Security, you have the federal government, and you have Minnesota, you have the state law enforcement. They have actually filed a lawsuit to gain access to the evidence garnered by the Department of Homeland Security, and DHS is saying, we're not going to share it with you.
Can they do that?
Well, they're trying to do it.
They're trying to do it,
So
but
here's
legally,
what they're
can they do
doing.
that?
One of their citizens gets killed by Border Patrol officers from God knows where, and we're not even going to share any of the information. And one thing's a fact: this Border Patrol officer, in theory, could be charged both federally, and he could be charged under state court under the doctrine of separate sovereigns. But what you would typically see in a case like this is decision makers not comment. Secondly, you would see an independent investigation that would come in to make sure the public knows there's going to be some integrity in the process, whether it was justified, not justified. So, this raises some really significant issues in terms of the use of lethal force, and but the other thing that has kind of emerged from these recent unfortunate killings of individuals is an immediate flashpoint to describe conduct that is not supported by the evidence. And when you see Kash Patel and when you see Noam, the head of DHS, say things that aren't true, and then finally they have to walk it back.
And there's some distancing going on right now.
There is some. You thought Michael Jackson could moonwalk. There are people, because what it's done, and unfortunately, it takes an Alex Pretti to become a martyr to when everybody says enough is enough. And what I'm hearing, and from the legal perspective, this isn't about illegal immigration anymore. This is about the use of unlawful government authority to carry out an objective. But I will tell you, if you apply the legal standard under the First Amendment, everyone has a right to address their grievances publicly. Government can regulate the time, manner, and place, not content. A Second Amendment, you have a right to bear that firearm, but you can't brandish, you can't threaten, you can't point. So if you look at all of those fundamental rights that Alex Pretti was cloaked in, when he walks down the street, that's one of our greatest gifts from our forefathers. Notwithstanding that cloak of constitutional safety, every right that he had was taken away.
Yes, it
and
was.
then a narrative created to justify an unauthorized lethal use of force based on what we see in the test.
Right.
Now, Renee Good I said it here, there is a different issue because a vehicle is a deadly weapon.
Right.
The vehicle was moving after it was told to stop. So you have a whole different dynamic when someone interjects themselves in an ongoing law enforcement operation. And, sometimes the law is it's a stubborn thing. Sometimes it's your friend, sometimes it's not. And Renee Good, an argument can be made that lethal use of force could have been justified under a objective totality of the circumstances.
It's still a tough case.
But it's still a tough case.
And we're about out of time.
Alex Pretti, again, it's not my opinion. It's not anyone's opinion. We are all eyewitnesses. I encourage people to form their own opinion, but form it under the context of whether you feel like anyone was in imminent fear of serious bodily death or injury.
From what you see.
Whether you think those people were protesters or domestic terrorists, and whether you think that Alex Pretti, like Kash Patel says, didn't have the Second Amendment right to take his firearm to a protest, because that's not what the same people told Kyle Rittenbarger, just a few years ago.
Let us know what you think about this.
Rittenhouse.
We both got it wrong.
At the same time.
Yes, we did. Thank goodness we have hope here in the wings.
But I want to say this. My thoughts and prayers go out to the family of Renee Good.
Yeah.
They go out to the family of Alex Pretti. I echo the comments of Chief Roush, and that is, whatever side you're on, you have the right to peacefully assemble and protest, and we need independence, and we need to turn down the rhetoric.
All right. Thank you so much for being with us. Let's talk more at 5:30, shall we?
Let's do.
We'd love to hear your comments as well.